The detention facility on Kepler 442b had been designed to break spirits, not bodies. The alien architects understood that psychological warfare proved far more effective than physical torture when dealing with captured humans. They had studied Earth's history extensively, learning how isolation and despair could reduce even the strongest warriors to whimpering shells. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the corner of his cell, methodically sorting through the pathetic collection of items his captors had allowed him to keep. A plastic noodle cup from his emergency rations, a torn piece of plastic wrap that had once covered his field equipment, a small mirror fragment from his broken communicator, and a length of synthetic rope from his gear harness. The Vorthan guards had laughed when they saw these worthless human trinkets, finding great amusement in their prisoners' attachment to such primitive tools. "Look at the human hoarding garbage," Guard Commander Vex had sneered through the translator. "Device, your species never learned to create proper technology. Even our children possess better tools than these relics." The other prisoners in the facility represented dozens of species from across the galaxy, each captured during various conflicts with the expanding Vorthan Empire. They had watched Jake's arrival with curiosity, noting how the guards seemed particularly entertained by mocking the human simple possessions. Most alien races had developed sophisticated nanotechnology or energy-based tools centuries ago, making Jake's collection appear laughably primitive by comparison. For 3 days, Jake observed the facility's routines while his fellow prisoners grew increasingly desperate. The Vorthans provided minimal nutrition through feeding tubes, but water remained severely rationed. The artificial atmosphere maintained barely adequate humidity levels, and several prisoners from desert worlds had already begun showing signs of severe dehydration. The facility's medical bay remained off-limits unless someone reached critical condition, which the Vorthans considered excellent motivation for compliance during interrogation sessions. On the 4th morning, Jake noticed condensation forming on the walls near the cell's single window during the early hours when Kepler 442b's twin suns created temperature differentials. The Vorthan architects had prioritized security over comfort, never considering how their prisoners might exploit basic physics principles. Jake began formulating a plan that would require precise timing and careful observation of guard patterns. The other prisoners watched with growing interest as Jake positioned his plastic noodle cup near the window, angling it to catch the morning condensation. He used the rope to secure the cup in place, then carefully stretched the plastic wrap over the opening, creating a sealed chamber. The mirror fragment went into the bottom of the cup, positioned to reflect sunlight and accelerate evaporation of the small amount of condensed water he had collected. "What is the human doing?" asked Tor, a reptilian prisoner from the Andromeda sector. "Those primitive tools cannot possibly accomplish anything useful." Jake continued working without explaining his methods. He had noticed that the Vorthan surveillance system focused primarily on detecting escape attempts or weapon construction, but seemed programmed to ignore what appeared to be meaningless activities with harmless objects. The guards had grown so accustomed to mocking his tools that they barely glanced in his direction anymore. By midday, the solar still had begun producing its first drops of pure water. The plastic wrap collected evaporated moisture and channeled it down into a small depression Jake had created using the rope as a collection channel. The process was slow but steady, generating approximately 50 milliliters of clean water every few hours under optimal conditions. The transformation in the cell block was gradual, but unmistakable. Word spread quietly among the prisoners that the human had somehow created a water source using nothing but discarded materials. Species that had dismissed Earth technology as backward began approaching Jake's cell with newfound respect and curiosity about his methods. "How does this simple arrangement produce water from air?" asked Nira, an insectoid engineer whose own Species had mastered quantum manipulation, but had never considered such basic applications of thermodynamics. Jake finally spoke, explaining the principles behind solar distillation in terms that translated across species barriers. Heat from the sun evaporates water molecules from any available source, including atmospheric humidity and the condensation on these walls. The plastic wrap traps the vapor and allows it to condense on the cooler surface, then gravity channels the pure water into the collection point. The simplicity was both elegant and revolutionary to beings who had forgotten how to solve problems without advanced technology. Jake's approach required no power source, no rare materials, and no sophisticated manufacturing processes. It could be replicated using almost any available materials and would function reliably in most atmospheric conditions. Within a week, Jake had helped other prisoners construct their own solar stills using various improvised materials. Torn fabric, broken containers, and reflective surfaces became the components for a dozen functioning water production systems. The improved hydration had noticeable effects on prisoner morale and health, reducing the effectiveness of the Vorthan psychological pressure tactics. Guard Commander Vex discovered the operation during a routine inspection, finding prisoners across multiple cells operating identical water collection systems. His initial reaction was fury at the security breach, but his scientific training forced him to acknowledge the ingenuity of the solution. The Vorthans had spent enormous resources developing complex atmospheric processors for their colonial expansion, yet a primitive human had achieved similar results using discarded garbage. "Explain this technology," Vex demanded, though his tone had shifted from mockery to grudging respect. The political implications were staggering. If humans could solve resource challenges using such simple methods, their potential value as allies rather than enemies might require serious reconsideration. Jake met the alien commander's gaze steadily. "This isn't advanced technology. It's basic physics applied with available materials. Every human child learns these principles in elementary education. We don't always need the most sophisticated tool for every problem." The revelation sent ripples through the Vorthan command structure. Intelligence reports had consistently portrayed humans as a technologically inferior species, worthy only of conquest or elimination. The discovery that human ingenuity could accomplish significant results using minimal resources forced a fundamental reassessment of Earth's strategic importance. Within a month, Jake found himself transferred from prisoner to technical consultant, working with Vorthan engineers to develop resource-efficient solutions for their expanding empire. The simple solar still had become a bridge between species, proving that true advancement sometimes meant remembering the elegant simplicity of basic principles rather than always reaching for the most complex available technology. The other prisoners watched in amazement as their former captor now sought the humans' advice on solving challenges that had puzzled their advanced civilization for generations. The tools they had mocked as primitive garbage had opened possibilities their sophisticated technology had overlooked entirely.